Most founders would kill for a magazine cover, but I spent 7 years praying no one would ever learn my name. In the Howard family, success was a finite resource, and my older brother had already claimed every ounce of it. I built my logistics empire in the dark, hiding revenue reports like illicit love letters. But the night Grant introduced his fiancée, a journalist, who made a living exposing secrets, I knew my time in the shadows was over. The silence of a climate-controlled warehouse is different from the silence of an empty house. It is heavier. It hums with the low vibration of server racks and the intermittent mechanical whine of automated sorting arms. I stood on the mezzanine level of Halcyon Rootworks, looking down at the grid of concrete and steel. It was 11 at night on a Tuesday. Most people see logistics as boring. The invisible plumbing of the modern world where cardboard boxes move from point A to point B. I saw it as a miracle of order. My staff had gone home hours ago. The night shift was purely mechanical. Down on the floor, the autonomous forklifts glided along magnetic strips, moving pallets of medical supplies and high-precision electronic components. They did not ask for praise. They did not need to be the center of attention. They simply did the work. I loved them for it. I checked the dashboard on my tablet. Revenue was up 12% this quarter. Our error rate was down to 0.03%. By any objective metric, Halcyon was a triumph. I was 34 years old, and I had built a company that moved millions of dollars of inventory across the tri-state area every single week, and almost nobody knew I existed. I kept my name off the website. My LinkedIn profile was a ghost town, listing my title merely as consultant. I did not do press releases. I did not sit on panels. When industry awards reached out to tell me I had been nominated for some accolade or another, I instructed my assistant to politely decline and request my name be removed from their database. Invisibility was not just a preference, it was a survival strategy. My phone buzzed against the metal railing. I knew who it was without looking. The vibration pattern was set specifically for immediate family. I let it buzz 3 times before I picked it up, staring down at the moving robots as I swiped the screen. It was a text from my mother. Claudia, don't forget. Friday. The invite is on your counter. Please try to look alive this time. I sighed and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The invitation had arrived yesterday via courier. Heavy cream cardstock with embossed gold lettering. It was not for a wedding, it was for an engagement dinner. My brother, Grant, was getting married. Again. This time, however, felt different. Grant was not just marrying a woman. He was marrying an asset. I drove home in the quiet dark of the freeway. My apartment was comfortable but sparse. I did not like clutter. On the granite island in the kitchen, the invitation sat like a threat. Grant Howard and Celeste Marlowe. I knew the name Celeste Marlowe. Everyone did. She was the investigative journalist who had broken the story on the erratic safety protocols at the City Transit Authority last year. She had a Caldwell Prize. She had a reputation for being ruthless, brilliant, and uncomfortably thorough. The idea of Celeste Marlowe sitting at a dinner table with my family made my stomach turn. My family survived on myths. We survived on the polite fiction that we were a cohesive, supportive unit, led by my father's business acumen and my mother's social grace. With Grant as the golden heir apparent, Celeste Marlowe destroyed myths for a living. Friday arrived with the inevitability of a tax audit. I dressed carefully. This was a specific uniform required for dealing with the Howards. I wore a navy dress that was expensive enough to show respect, but simple enough to ensure I did not draw the eye. Neutral heels, minimal makeup. I pulled my hair back into a low knot. The goal was to be present, but not memorable. I was the supporting cast. I was the scenery. The dinner was at Le Cavalier, a French restaurant downtown where the waiters wore white gloves and the lighting was dim enough to hide cosmetic surgery scars. When I walked in, I saw them immediately. They were seated at the best table in the room, a round banquette near the window. My father, Martin, was laughing too loudly at something the sommelier said. My mother was adjusting the collar of her blazer, scanning the room to see who was watching them. And there was Grant. He stood up as I approached. Grant was 37, 3 years older than me, and he had the kind of face that politicians bought with focus group money. Square jaw, bright eyes, a smile that suggested he knew a secret and was willing to share it with you if you were worthy. He looked expensive. He always looked expensive. "Audrey," he said. He opened his arms. "You made it." I let him hug me. He smelled of sandalwood and scotch. He squeezed just a little too hard, a physical reminder of his presence. "Hello, Grant," I said. I pulled away and nodded to my parents. "Mother, Father, you look tired," my mother said instantly. She did not say hello. She reached out and smoothed a stray hair on my temple. "Are you sleeping? You look pale." "I am fine," I said. "Just work, work." Grant laughed. He turned to the woman sitting beside him. "Audrey is always working. It is her hobby." I looked at the woman. Celeste Marlowe was striking, but not in the way Grant usually preferred. Grant liked women who were decorative. Celeste looked sharp. She had dark curls cut into a bob that framed a face dominated by intelligent, watchful eyes. She was wearing a structured black jacket, and she was looking at me with a curiosity that made me want to check the exits. "Audrey," Grant said, gesturing with a flourish. "This is Celeste, the woman who finally managed to pin me down." Celeste smiled. It was a small, genuine smile. It did not reach her eyes in a way that suggested warmth, but rather amusement. "It is nice to meet you." "Audrey," she said. Her voice was lower than I expected. Calm and resonant. "Grant talks about you often." I stiffened. I could only imagine what he said. "I doubt that." I said. I sat down in the empty chair across from them. "No, really," Celeste said. She leaned forward slightly, ignoring the menu in front of her. "He says you are in tech, or logistics." He was a little vague on the details. "Logistics," I said. "It is very boring. I love logistics." Celeste said. I paused. I waited for the punchline. People did not love logistics. People tolerated logistics. "I am serious," she said. "I just finished a piece on the cold chain supply issues for pharmaceuticals. The complexity of keeping a vaccine at -70 degrees while moving it across 3 continents is fascinating. It is the invisible nervous system of the world." She used the same word I had used in my head. Invisible. I felt a crack in my armor. It was a dangerous thing, to feel seen by someone who was supposed to be an adversary. "It is," I said, "it is chaos management. You have to predict failure before it happens." Grant cleared his throat. He did not like the conversation drifting away from him. He placed a hand on the back of Celeste's neck. His fingers were long and manicured. It looked like a caress, but I knew the weight of that hand. It was a claim. "Celeste is a little intense," Grant said to me, winking. "She is used to interrogating people. You have to forgive her. She is just too accomplished for her own good. Sometimes she forgets to turn the brain off and just enjoy the champagne." He smiled as he said it. He showed his teeth. It was the kind of statement that sounded like pride to a stranger. My fiancée is so smart. But I had lived with Grant for 34 years. I heard the other frequency. "She is too much. She is threatening me. I need to take her down a peg." Celeste did not flinch, but I saw a tiny tightening at the corner of her mouth. She reached for her water glass and took a sip. "I am just interested in your sister." "Grant," she said calmly, "you told me she was the quiet one." "She is." My father boomed. He slapped the table jovially. "Audrey has always been the mouse. Grant was the lion. That is just nature. Some people are built for the stage, and some are built for the audience." I picked up my menu. I studied the appetizers. I concentrated on the font. I told myself that I was made of stone. I told myself that their words were just noise, like the grinding of a gear that needed oil. "So," Celeste said, ignoring my father entirely. She kept her eyes on me. "Do you run your own firm, or do you work for one of the big carriers I started my own?" I said, "It is small." Grant laughed again. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Small is a nice way to put it," he said. "It is cute. It keeps her busy. I actually helped her get it off the ground. Back in the day." I froze. My hand gripped the heavy silver fork. "I beg your pardon," I said. Grant waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, you know, back when you were trying to get that first contract with the Distinct Auto Parts Group, I made the call to Miller. I set up the room. You would have been stuck in the lobby without me." The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. I remembered that day perfectly. I remembered asking Grant for a contact number. I remembered him giving me the wrong email address on purpose. I remembered him showing up at the meeting I had fought to get on my own, walking in and shaking hands with the client, talking over me for 20 minutes about golf and crypto, and then leaving before the actual pitch. I had secured that contract because I had stayed for 3 hours after he left, walking the client through my routing algorithms until he realized I could save him 40% on fuel costs. Grant had done nothing but suck the oxygen out of the room, but here, at this table, in the candlelight, history was being rewritten. That is not exactly how I remember it. I said. My voice was tight. Grant rolled his eyes. He looked at Celeste. "See? She is sensitive. Siblings. Right." Celeste looked at Grant. Then she looked at me. She did not smile. She was filing something away. I could see the journalist coming online. She was checking sources in her head. "It sounds like you have done well for yourself." "Audrey," Celeste said, regardless of who made the phone call. "Thank you," I said. The waiter arrived to take our orders. The tension dissipated, or rather, it was covered up by the ritual of ordering food. My mother ordered the salmon and then spent 5 minutes telling the waiter exactly how she wanted the sauce on the side. My father ordered a steak and a second bottle of wine. Grant ordered the tasting menu for himself and Celeste without asking her what she wanted. "I will have the risotto," Celeste said to the waiter, cutting Grant off, "and I will keep my own menu. Thank you." Grant's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He looked at her with a mix of desire and irritation. "Feisty tonight," he said. "I just know what I want," she said. The dinner progressed in a slow, suffocating loop. My parents asked Celeste about the wedding planning. They did not ask about her work. They did not mention her Pulitzer. They asked about flowers. They asked about the guest list. They asked if she planned to change her name. "Of course she is changing it," my father said. "Celeste Howard. It has a ring to it. I have not decided yet." Celeste said, "Marlowe is my byline. It is my brand." "Brand," Grant scoffed. He poured more wine into his glass. "You are not a detergent. Darling, you are a wife. Or you will be." He laughed to show he was joking. He was not joking. "I need to use the restroom," I said. I stood up too quickly. My chair scraped against the floor. I needed air. I needed to be away from the gravitational pull of Grant's ego. I walked to the back of the restaurant, past the polished mahogany bar and the couples whispering in corners. The restroom was empty. I stood in front of the mirror and ran my hands under cold water. I pressed my wet palms against my pulse points. "Do not engage," I told my reflection. "Do not correct the record. Do not give them anything." I stayed there for 5 minutes, breathing deeply. When I finally walked back out, I took a wrong turn. The hallway curved around a private dining alcove before leading back to the main floor. I heard voices. I stopped. It was Grant. He must have stepped away from the table to take a call or grab a smoke, but he was not on the phone. He was talking to someone standing near the coat check, a man I recognized vaguely as one of his college friends. A wealth management guy named Pacey. "She is relentless," Grant was saying. His voice was low, hissing with frustration. "Everything has to be a debate. We are picking out venue options, and she is cross-referencing the vendor's labor practices. It is exhausting. She is smart." "Man," Pacey said, "that is what you wanted. The power couple thing." "Yeah, well, there is power, and then there is being eclipsed," Grant said. "I stand next to her, and I feel like I'm holding her purse. I need a win. Pacey, I need something that is mine. She makes me look like an accessory." I pressed myself against the wall. My heart hammered against my ribs. "So what are you going to do?" Pacey asked. "I am handling it," Grant said. "I am going to remind her who the heavy hitter is in this family. She thinks she is the only one who can make headlines. But you know, she is fragile. She has all this anxiety she hides. I just need to adjust the pressure, adjust the pressure. The phrase chilled me. It was mechanical, calculated. I waited until I heard Grant's footsteps fade back toward the dining room before I moved. I walked back to the table on unsteady legs. When I sat down, Grant was already there, smiling, holding Celeste's hand on top of the tablecloth. He looked like the picture of a devoted fiancé. "You missed the appetizers," he said. "I am not hungry," I said. The main courses arrived. I pushed the food around my plate. I watched Celeste. She was eating slowly, her eyes scanning the room, observing the waiters, observing my parents. She was gathering data. She did not look like a woman who was about to be broken. She looked like a woman who was figuring out the puzzle. When the dessert menus came, Celeste turned to me. "Audrey," she said. "Yes, Grant mentioned you are in logistics," she said, "but he did not name the company. What is it called?" I hesitated. My instinct was to lie, to give a fake name, but this was Celeste Marlowe. She would find out in 5 seconds on her phone. "Halcyon Rootworks," I said softly. Celeste stopped. Her hand froze halfway to her water glass. She turned fully in her chair to look at me. Her eyes widened slightly. "Halcyon," she repeated. "You are the founder of Halcyon Rootworks." "Yes," I said. Why Grant looked up from his phone. "What is it? Is that bad? Did she get sued?" Celeste ignored him. She lowered her voice. "Audrey, I am guest editing a special issue for Ledger and Laurel next month. We are doing a feature called 30 Rising Innovators. It is in partnership with North Shore Summit." My blood ran cold. Ledger and Laurel was the Bible of the business world. North Shore Summit was the premier event for tech founders. "Okay," I said. "We have a short list," she said. "It was generated by a blind nomination process from our partner networks. We look for high-growth companies with low public visibility. Hidden gems." She paused. "Your name is at the top of the list. Audrey." The sounds of the restaurant seemed to drop away. I felt like I was underwater. What I whispered. "The editorial board was raving about your efficiency metrics." Celeste said, "They said you have rewritten the code for last-mile delivery in the Northeast. I had no idea that was you. I had no idea you were that Howard." I felt a wave of nausea. This was my nightmare. I had spent 7 years building walls. I had spent 7 years making sure that my success could not be co-opted, or critiqued, or stolen by the people sitting at this table. I did not apply. I said quickly. My voice rose a pitch. "I did not ask for that." "I know," Celeste said. "It is a nomination. You were scouted." "Who scouted me?" I demanded. Celeste shook her head. "It is anonymous." "But Audrey, this is huge. The cover is a possibility. It is a career-making feature." Grant dropped his fork. It hit the plate with a loud clatter. "Wait," he said. He looked from Celeste to me. He looked confused. And then, slowly, his face hardened. "Wait a second. Audrey, Ledger, and Laurel." He laughed. It was a nervous, disbelief-filled sound. "There must be a mistake," he said. "Audrey just runs a warehouse. She moves pallets. It is not exactly innovation." Celeste turned to him. Her eyes were cool. "Actually, Grant, Halcyon is outperforming the majors in reliability by 40%. It is extremely innovative." Grant's face turned a mottled red. He looked at me. He looked at me like I had stolen something from him. He looked at me like I had walked into his house and taken the paintings off the walls. "You never told us that," he said. His voice was accusatory. "Why are you hiding it because of this?" I thought, "Because of exactly this look on your face." I looked at Celeste. I needed to shut this down. I needed to kill it before it breathed. "I cannot do it," I said. Celeste blinked. "What I cannot do the interview." I said, "I am declining the nomination. Please take my name off the list." "Audrey," Celeste said. She reached out and touched my arm. "Do not be impulsive. This is the kind of recognition that changes a trajectory. Investors, partners. I do not need investors." I said, "I own 100% of my company, and I do not want the press. Please, Celeste, if you respect me at all, you will delete my name." Celeste looked at me. She studied my face. She saw the panic. She saw the fear. She looked at Grant, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and calculating rage. She saw the dynamic. "Okay," she said softly. "I will not push you." She pulled a business card out of her clutch and slid it across the tablecloth to me. It was heavy, matte black. "But keep this," she said. "If you change your mind, or if you just want to talk off the record." I took the card. I hid it in my lap. Grant cleared his throat. He picked up his wine glass. He drained it in one swallow. "Well," he said, "that was weird." He signaled for the waiter. "Check," he called out, loudly. The rest of the dinner was a blur. My mother complained about the draft. My father told a story about a golf game I had heard 1,000 times. Grant did not look at me again. He sat in brooding silence, spinning his signet ring on his finger. When we finally walked out to the valet stand, the air was cold. "Good night, Audrey," Celeste said. She looked at me with that same intense curiosity. "Good night," I said. Grant leaned in to kiss my cheek. His lips were cold. He whispered in my ear, so low that only I could hear it. "You really had me going," he whispered. Ledger and Laurel almost sounded real for a second. He pulled back and smiled. A shark smile. "Drive safe, kiddo," he said. I got into my car. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over. I sat in the dark, breathing hard, watching the city lights blur through the windshield. Grant thought it was a lie. He thought I was making it up to get attention. That was safer. It was better if he thought I was a liar than if he knew I was a success. But Celeste knew. I looked at the business card sitting on the passenger seat. Celeste Marlowe, senior editor, Ledger and Laurel. She had opened a door, and even though I had slammed it shut, I could feel the draft coming through the cracks. The secrets were loose. The silence was broken. I put the car in gear and drove back to my warehouse, back to the robots, back to the dark. But as I watched the bay doors open, I knew with a sinking certainty that the walls I had built were no longer high enough. The invitation was not just for dinner. It was for a war. Monday morning arrived with the sterile precision of a scheduled delivery. I was in my office at 6 o'clock, 2 hours before the administrative staff, reviewing the fleet maintenance logs. The warehouse below was shifting gears from the night crew to the day crew. A choreography of forklifts and punch cards that I usually found soothing. But the silence in my office was not soothing today. It was waiting. At 8 o'clock, my inbox chimed. Subject editorial inquiry Ledger and Laurel. 30 rising innovators. I stared at the screen. My first instinct was that Grant had set this up. It was a prank, a test, or a trap. He had whispered in my ear at the valet stand that he thought I was lying, and this felt like his way of calling my bluff. I opened the email carefully, expecting to see his personal assistant CC'd, or some tone of familial condescension. It was neither. The email was from the independent editorial board of Ledger and Laurel. It was formal, detailed, and completely professional. It stated that while Celeste Marlowe was the guest editor for the issue, the selection committee was an external body of industry analysts and venture capitalists. They had flagged Halcyon Rootworks based on our operating margins and our retention rates. They wanted a preliminary background call. It was real. I leaned back in my chair, the ergonomic mesh dug into my shoulder blades. For 7 years, I had operated on the principle that anonymity was safety. If you are small, you are not a target. If you are quiet, you cannot be misquoted. Audrey. I looked up. Nia Park, my chief operating officer, was standing in the doorway. Nia was the only person at Halcyon who knew the full extent of my aversion to publicity. Though she did not know the specific biological reasons for it, she just knew that I killed press inquiries with the efficiency of a hitman. "You look like you have seen a ghost," Nia said. She walked in and set a cup of green tea on my desk. "Read this," I said. I turned the monitor toward her. Nia read quickly. Her eyes scanned the text, darting back and forth. When she finished, she looked at me. and a slow, fierce smile spread across her face. Finally, she said, "No." I said, "Audrey, look at the recruitment numbers." Nia said. She tapped the screen. "We are losing senior engineers to the giants because nobody knows who we are. We are fighting for talent with one hand tied behind our back. A feature in Ledger and Laurel. That is validation. That is gravity. People want to work for a winner. It is dangerous." I said, "It is business." She countered, "You have built a $40 million company in the dark. Imagine what we could do with the lights on." She was right, mathematically, strategically. She was absolutely right, but Nia did not know the Howards. Nia did not know that in my family, attention was a zero-sum game. If I took a piece of the light, Grant would feel the room getting darker around him, and he would start breaking things to get it back. "I am afraid." I said. I was rarely honest about my fear, but I trusted Nia, afraid of what she asked. Success, afraid of it becoming a spectacle. I said, "My family have a way of metabolizing my life. They eat it." Nia looked at me steadily. "Then do not let them," she said. "This is not about them. This is about the work. Look at the email. Audrey, they cited our routing efficiency. They cited the carbon offset model. This is about what you built." I looked at the screen again. Independent editorial board. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I will take the call," I said. "But on my terms. Background only. No photos yet. And if I smell even a whiff of a family angle, I pull the plug." The decision unlocked a memory I had kept in a lead-lined box for a decade. I was 24 years old. I was living in a studio apartment that smelled of mildew, trying to broker freight deals with a laptop that overheated if I ran more than 2 spreadsheets at once. I had found a distributor who needed to move high-value electronics, a contract that would have stabilized my cash flow for a year, but I could not get a meeting. The gatekeeper was a man named Elias Thorne, and he did not take cold calls from 24-year-old women. Grant had found out. He was 27 then, flush with cash from a startup exit that our father had heavily subsidized. "I know Thorne," Grant had said. "We play squash at the athletic club. I will walk you in." I was so grateful I nearly cried. I prepared for 3 days. I built a pitch deck that was bulletproof. When we arrived at the club, Grant was wearing a tailored suit. I was wearing a blazer I had bought at a consignment shop. Grant walked right past the reception desk. Waving to the staff, he found Thorne in the lounge. Elias Grant boomed. He introduced me. "This is my little sister, Audrey. She is playing around with some shipping ideas. I told her you were the guy to talk to. Be nice to her." "Okay, playing around." He diminished me before I had even opened my mouth, but I swallowed it. I sat down and I pitched. I pitched with the desperation of someone whose rent was late. Thorne was skeptical, but he listened. He gave me a trial run. 1 shipment. If I messed it up, I was dead. I did not mess it up. I stayed up for 48 hours straight tracking that truck. I delivered early. I won the contract. 6 months later, at my parents' Christmas party, I overheard Grant talking to a group of family friends. He was holding a scotch, leaning against the mantelpiece. "Yeah, Audrey is doing okay," he said. "I basically built that business for her. I placed her in the room with her biggest client. She would still be waiting tables if I had not leveraged my network. It is a lot of work, managing her career and mine." I stood in the hallway, holding a tray of appetizers I had been asked to pass around. I felt the heat rising in my neck. He had made one introduction that he framed as a favor to a child, and now he was claiming equity in my sweat. I walked away that night, and I never asked him for another thing. The call with Ledger and Laurel was scheduled for Thursday afternoon. I took it in the conference room with the blinds drawn. It was a video call. Celeste was there, looking professional in a cream-colored blouse, sitting in front of a bookshelf. Beside her on the screen was a man I did not know. He looked young, perhaps 25, with thick glasses and an expression of serious concentration. "Audrey," Celeste said, "thank you for doing this. This is Nolan Pierce. He is our lead fact-checker and researcher for the Innovators List." "Hello?" Nolan said. He did not smile. He looked like he was already cross-referencing my existence. "Hi," I said. "We want to keep this focused." Celeste said, "No fluff. The board is interested in the mechanics of Halcyon. How you achieved a zero-error rate in Q4. How you are handling the labor shortages." I relaxed slightly. This was safe ground. I could talk about algorithms and labor retention strategies for hours. We spent 40 minutes in the weeds. I walked them through our dynamic routing software, explaining how we incentivize drivers based on safety metrics rather than just speed. Nolan asked sharp, specific questions. He wanted to see the raw data on our fuel savings. He wanted to know the exact terms of our insurance policies. He was looking for holes. I respected that. Toward the end of the hour, the conversation shifted. Celeste leaned forward slightly. The journalist emerged. "Audrey," she said, "I have profiled a lot of founders. Usually, by the time they reach your revenue benchmarks, they are everywhere. Podcasts, panels, Twitter threads. You are a ghost." I kept my face neutral. "I focus on execution." I said, "It is more than that," she said. Her voice was gentle, but it had an edge. "We could barely find a photo of you online. Your domain registration is proxy protected. That takes effort." Why the silence? I hesitated. I could not tell her that I was hiding from her fiancé. I could not tell her that my brother was a narcissist who viewed my success as a personal insult. "I do not like distractions," I said. It was the line I had rehearsed. Celeste watched me. She did not blink. "Distractions," she repeated. "Is that what you call it?" The call ended 5 minutes later. I closed my laptop and exhaled a breath I felt I had been holding for days. I had survived. I had given them the numbers. I had given them the business case. I had not given them the family drama, or so I thought. On Friday, Grant texted me, "Lunch my treat. We need to celebrate." I stared at the phone. Celebrate. He knew. I met him at a seafood place by the harbor. It was the kind of place where they charged $30 for a crab cake the size of a golf ball. Grant was already seated when I arrived, wearing sunglasses even though we were indoors. "There she is," he called out. "The mogul." He stood up and kissed my cheek. He seemed energetic, vibrating with a manic sort of enthusiasm. "Sit, sit," he said. I ordered the tower. He gestured to a massive tiered platter of shellfish on the table. "What is this?" "Grant," I asked. "Celeste told me." He said, "He cracked a crab claw with a silver tool. She told me you took the call, that you are in the running for the list." I felt a spike of betrayal. Celeste had told him. Of course she had. They were engaged. They shared a bed. Why did I think she would keep my secrets? "It is just a preliminary interview." I said, "Nothing is guaranteed." "Oh, come on," Grant said. "You are a shoo-in. A female founder in a blue-collar industry. It is catnip for them. And honestly, Audrey, I am proud of you." He said it with such conviction that I almost believed him. I looked for the sarcasm, but his eyes were wide and sincere. "Thank you," I said cautiously. "This is big for us," he said. "For the family. I was telling Mom and Dad yesterday. This is our moment. The Howard name is finally getting the print it deserves. Our moment." I put my napkin in my lap. "It is a story about the company." "Grant." I said, "Not the family." Grant waved a dismissal. "Same thing. Everything is connected. Look, I have been thinking. When the article comes out, we should do a joint party. North Shore Summit is partnering on the list. Right, I know the organizers. I can get us a private section at the gala. You, me, Celeste, the power trio." I stared at him. He was already rewriting the narrative. He was not just adjacent to my success. He was planning to host it. "Grant." I said, "I do not even know if I'm being selected." "You will be," he said, "especially with Celeste editing. I mean, let's be real. That helps." He winked. It was a subtle knife. He was implying that I would only get it because of nepotism, because of him. "Celeste is recused from the selection." I said, "It is an independent board." Sure, Grant said. He dipped a shrimp in cocktail sauce. "But perception is reality, right? People will talk. They will say she pulled strings. That is why you need me there, to balance the optics, to show that we are a united front. I realized then what he was doing. He was terrified. He was terrified that I would surpass him. So he was scrambling to attach himself to me like a barnacle. If he stood next to me, he could claim he was part of the foundation. Grant, I said, I want to keep this separate. He stopped chewing. His expression shifted. The warmth evaporated, replaced by a cold, petulant stare. Separate, he said, like you are ashamed of us. No, I said, like I run a business and you run. Whatever it is you are doing now, consulting, he snapped. I am in high-level strategy. You wouldn't understand the nuance. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes narrowing. You know, he said, his voice dropping. You should be careful with Celeste. I paused. Why she needs to be the smartest person in the room, Grant said. He leaned in. Conspiratorial. She loves the story, but she hates the competition. If you get this cover, or this feature, she is going to smile. But underneath, she is going to resent you. She is used to being the star. He was projecting so hard it was almost tragic. He was describing himself. She seems very professional. I said, she is, Grant said. Until she isn't. Just watch your back. She digs. She looks for dirt. And she will use it, even against family. I am just trying to protect you. Odds. You have always been a little naive about people. I looked at my brother. He was trying to poison the well. He wanted me to distrust Celeste, and he wanted Celeste to distrust me. If we were allies, we were a threat. If we were enemies, he could control us both. I am not naive, Grant. I said, not anymore. The pressure campaign escalated the next day. My mother called me while I was inspecting a new fleet of electric vans. Audrey, she said. Her voice was bright, which meant she wanted something. Grant tells me you are doing an interview with that magazine. Maybe. I said, well, that is wonderful, she said. But listen, darling, if they ask about your background, let's keep it tasteful. Tasteful, I asked. You know what I mean, she said. No sob stories, no mentioning how hard it was in the beginning. It makes the family look uncaring. We supported you as best we could. You had a roof over your head. I gripped the phone. I had a roof over my head because I paid rent to them starting the day I turned 18, while they paid for Grant's apartment in the city for 5 years. I will tell the truth. Mother, I said, the truth is complex, she said sharply. Just remember who raised you. And remember that Grant is sensitive right now. This wedding is a lot of pressure. Do not make him look small. She hung up. They were circling the wagons. They did not care about my company. They cared about the reflection in the mirror. 2 days later, another email arrived from Ledger and Laurel. It was from Nolan Pierce, the fact-checker. Subject documentation request. Follow up. Dear Ms. Howard, thank you for the data access. The operational metrics verify perfectly. We are just finalizing the financial timeline for the origin section of the profile. We see a seed injection of $200,000 in 2018 marked as Angel Bridge. Can you provide the source documentation for that transaction? We need to verify it wasn't self-funded or a family loan to clear the conflict of interest check. I stared at the email. 2018. I remembered that money. It was the money that saved Halcyon. I had payroll due, and 2 clients were late on invoices. I was 48 hours away from bankruptcy. I had reached out to a broker I met at a logistics conference, a guy named Miller. He said he knew a civic trust that did small business grants for regional development. I had signed the paperwork, got the check, and never looked back. I paid it back with interest 6 months later. I opened my encrypted file server. I searched for 2018 financials. I found the folder labeled Seed/Bridge. I opened the PDF of the loan agreement. There it was, Renfall Civic Trust. It looked standard, a generic letterhead, a philanthropic vehicle focused on Northeast economic revitalization. I prepared the file to send to Nolan. But something stopped me. A nagging instinct, the same instinct that told me when a shipment was going to be late before the driver even called. Renfall Civic Trust. I opened a browser window. I typed the name into the search bar. The results were sparse. A landing page with a stock photo of a lighthouse. A mission statement full of buzzwords: empowerment, community, legacy. I clicked on the About Us tab. It listed the current board of directors. None of the names were familiar. I went to a deeper search tool, a paid database I used for vetting suppliers. I punched in the tax ID number from the loan document. I pulled the Form 990 filings from 2017 and 2018. I scrolled down to the list of officers and key employees. My finger hovered over the trackpad. There, in black and white, listed as Director/Strategic Outreach for the fiscal year 2018 Grant Howard. The room seemed to tilt. Grant was on the board of the trust that gave me the money. I sat back, my heart hammering against my ribs. He had never told me. He had watched me sweat. He had watched me cry over payroll. He had watched me beg for a lifeline. And then the money had appeared. Anonymously, through a broker. Why, if he wanted credit, he would have told me. Grant never did anything without demanding applause. Why hide it? Unless the money wasn't his. Unless the money wasn't clean. I looked at the document again. Renfall Civic Trust. I remembered something Grant had said at the lunch. I have been in high-level strategy. You wouldn't understand the nuance. And I remembered something else. The reason I needed the money in 2018 was because I had lost a major contract. A contract that had been canceled abruptly, without explanation, by a vendor who was friends with Grant. A cold realization settled in my stomach. It was a theory, dark and jagged. What if he created the crisis so he could provide the rescue? Or worse, what if he used the rescue to move money that needed to be moved? I looked at the email from Nolan Pierce. He was waiting for the documentation. If I sent this, he would see Grant's name. He would see the connection. He would ask the question. And if I didn't send it, I would have to withdraw from the story. I was at a crossroads. To the left was silence, safety, and the continued suffocation of my family's narrative. To the right was the truth. And the truth looked like a grenade with the pin pulled out. I picked up my phone. I did not call Grant. I did not call my mother. I called the records department of the state archives. I would not ask Celeste to dig. I would not ask Nolan. I was going to dig myself. I needed to know if the hand that fed me was the same hand that had been holding me down, and I needed to know before I let Celeste Marlowe turn the lights on. I replied to Nolan. Hi, Nolan. Digging the file out of cold storage. We'll have it to you by Monday. I bought myself 48 hours. I turned off my monitor. The warehouse below was humming. A machine of perfect logic. But up here, in the silence of my office, the logic was breaking down. I was no longer just a CEO. I was a detective in a crime scene I had been living in for my entire life. And the prime suspect was coming to dinner on Sunday. Saturday morning was usually my sanctuary. I would go to the warehouse, walk the floor while the machines were in sleep mode, and think. But this Saturday, the silence felt contaminated. The discovery of Grant's name on the Renfall Civic Trust Board documents had turned my history into a crime scene, and I was the only witness who hadn't realized a crime had been committed. I needed corroboration. I needed to know if this was an isolated incident of financial voyeurism or a pattern of behavior that spanned my entire career. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a diner in West Hartford, dialing a number I hadn't called in 4 years. Dr. Elise Ketter. Elise had been my advisor during my brief, aborted attempt at a master's degree before I dropped out to start Halcyon. She was a woman of steel-spined integrity who viewed corporate politics with the disdain of a virologist looking at a pathogen. She picked up on the third ring. Audrey Howard, she said. Her voice was dry, identical to how I remembered it. I assumed you had been swallowed whole by the private sector. Hello, Elise? I said, I am sorry to call on a weekend. You are calling because you need something. She said, you were never one for social check-ins. What is it? Reference board seat information. I said, I took a breath. Do you remember when I was first fundraising for Halcyon back in 2016 vividly? She said, you were manic. You had a slide deck and an ulcer. I remember you mentioned once that my brother had reached out to you. I said, I never followed up on it. I was too busy trying to keep the lights on. But I need to know now. What did he say? There was a pause on the line. I could hear the clink of porcelain. Perhaps a teacup being set down. Grant, she said, the handsome one. The one who smiles with his bottom teeth. That is the one. He called me 3 times. Elise said. He introduced himself as your strategic advisor. He wanted to discuss the valuation cap I was suggesting for your seed round. He told me he was managing your external relationships because you were great at the tech, but how did he put it fragile with the money? I closed my eyes. Fragile. He said he was an advisor, I asked. He implied he was a co-founder in all but name. She said, he asked for the contact lists of the angel investors I was introducing you to. He said he wanted to vet them personally to protect you. Did you give them to him, Audrey? Please, she scoffed. I have been in this industry for 40 years. I know a parasite when I see one. I told him that if he wanted to discuss your business, he needed a letter of authorization from you. He never called back. I gripped the steering wheel. Thank you. Elise, I said. Why are you asking now, she asked. Because I think he is still doing it. I said, get a lawyer. Audrey, she said, and change your passwords. I hung up. The confirmation settled in my stomach like cold lead. It wasn't just money, it was reputation. Grant had been actively undermining my autonomy while pretending to be my shield. He had painted me as incompetent to the very people I needed to impress. Also, he could position himself as the necessary gatekeeper. I went home and opened my laptop. I did not log into my work email. I logged into an old, dormant personal account I used during the early startup days. I searched for Grant. Thousands of results. Family chains, holiday plans, forwards of jokes I never laughed at. I narrowed the search terms. Grant and North Shore. It took me an hour of scrolling. But I found it, a forwarded thread from 7 years ago. Grant had sent it to me by mistake, or perhaps out of arrogance, thinking I wouldn't notice the trail below the message body. The subject line was Intro for Halcyon/North Shore Summit. The email was from Grant to a man named Marcus Vane, who was now one of the lead organizers of the North Shore Summit. Marcus, the email read, attaching the deck for my sister's project. It is raw, but there is something there. I am massaging the business model for her. Let me know if you want to grab a drink and discuss how we can position this. She is the face, but I am steering the ship. She is the face, but I am steering the ship. I stared at the words until they blurred. He had sent my proprietary work to a third party without my consent, and he had claimed ownership of my mind. He had been shadowing me for a decade, every success I had. He had privately stamped with his own watermark, and now, with the Ledger and Laurel interview days away, he was terrified that the watermark was about to be washed off. The offices of Ledger and Laurel were in Midtown, in a building that smelled of floor wax and old money. I arrived 15 minutes early on Tuesday. I had agreed to the interview on the condition that it be strictly professional. No lunch, no dinner, no social lubricant, just a tape recorder and the truth. I was escorted to a glass-walled conference room. The view of the city was aggressive, a canyon of steel and glass. Celeste walked in a moment later. She looked different here than she did at family dinners. At dinner, she was softer, trying to fit the shape of a fiancée. Here, she was sharp angles and kinetic energy. She wore a charcoal blazer and held a tablet like a weapon. Audrey, she said. She did not hug me. She extended a hand. Thank you for coming. I shook her hand. It was firm. I am here for the work. Celeste, I said, that is the boundary. Understood, she said. She sat down and placed a small digital recorder on the table between us. She tapped the screen of her tablet. This is on the record, she said. Starting now. She began with the technicals. She asked about the algorithmic architecture of my routing software. She asked about the decision to use a hybrid fleet instead of going full electric immediately. She was prepared. She had read my white papers. She treated me not as a sister-in-law, but as a subject matter expert. It was intoxicating. For the first time in my life, I was speaking to someone who was listening to the content of my sentences, not the tone of my voice. We talked for 40 minutes about the ethics of logistics. Efficiency is usually a euphemism for exploitation. I said, leaning forward, the industry standard is to squeeze the drivers. You classify them as contractors, you deny them benefits, and you route them on schedules that require them to skip bathroom breaks to hit targets. That is not efficiency. That is theft. It is stealing health from your workforce to subsidize speed for your client. And Halcyon is different, Celeste asked. We pay hourly, I said. We build slack into the route. We lose 4% on speed. But our retention is 90% higher than the industry average. In the long run, reliability is cheaper than churn. Celeste watched me. Her eyes were dark and intelligent. You turned down a contract with Gellin Logistics last year. She said, it was worth $8 million. Why? Because they wanted us to cut the safety protocols during peak season. I said, they wanted us to waive the weight limits on the vans. I refused. That is a lot of money to leave on the table. She said, I do not build for the quarter. I said, I build for the decade. If I break my system for a check, I do not have a company, I just have a hustle. Celeste nodded. She made a note on her tablet. Then she put the stylus down. The air in the room shifted. The technical part was over. Audrey, she said, you talk about control a lot. Controlling the route, controlling the culture, keeping the equity. I stiffened. It is my company. I said, most founders bring in partners, she said, advisors, board members. You have kept the circle incredibly small, almost hermetic. She looked at me. It was the look of a hunter who had spotted movement in the brush. Who tried to stop you, she asked. The question hung in the air. It was not on the list of pre-approved topics, but it was the heart of the story. And we both knew it. I looked out the window at the skyline. I thought of Grant's email. I am steering the ship. I thought of my mother telling me to be tasteful. I thought of the years of being told that my ambition was unseemly, that my success was accidental, that I was a supporting character in the Grant Howard show. I looked back at Celeste. People who needed me to stay small so they could stay important. I said, I did not say his name. I did not have to. Celeste held my gaze. She did not push for a name either. She knew. I saw the recognition in her eyes, a flicker of sadness that she quickly suppressed. Thank you. Audrey, she said. She reached out and turned off the recorder. Is that it? I asked. That is it, she said. She stood up. She looked tired. There were fine lines around her eyes that the magazine photos didn't show. Audrey, she said, her voice softer now. Off the record. Yes, be careful, she said. I stood up and gathered my bag. You too, I said. The fallout from the interview was not immediate. It was atmospheric. The pressure in the family system began to rise. Grant did not attack me directly. That was not his style. He attacked the environment. I saw it happen 2 nights later at a cocktail party for my father's birthday. It was held at the country club. Grant was holding court near the bar, a scotch in one hand, his arm draped over the back of Celeste's chair. He was performing the role of the proud fiancé, but the performance was curdling. Celeste is working on this big piece, Grant said to a group of my father's golf buddies. She is very excited. She thinks she has found the next Steve Jobs. He laughed. It was a patronizing sound. She loves a good underdog story. He continued. Sometimes she loves the story so much she forgets to check if the dog actually bites. Celeste stiffened. She took a sip of her wine. Grant? She said, warningly. Oh, come on, honey, he said. He squeezed her shoulder. I am just saying. You get attached. You have this crusader complex. It is cute. But in the real world, business is a little sharper than your narratives. He looked at the men. She investigates people like she is looking for a crime. He said, Me. I just look for the profit. That is the difference between those who write about the world and those who shape it. The men laughed. They were comfortable with that dynamic. The serious man, the emotional woman. I watched from across the room. I saw Celeste's hand tighten on the stem of her glass until her knuckles were white. She did not argue. She did not make a scene. She endured it. Later that night, as people were leaving, Grant cornered me in the foyer. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. "So," he said, "you did the interview?" "Yes," I said. "Did you stick to the script?" he asked. I told the truth. "Grant." He stepped closer. He invaded my personal space, looming over me. "You know," he said, his voice low and silky, "this is really hard on Celeste. All this scrutiny. She is stressed. She is fragile. She seems fine to me." I said, "She masks it." He said, "But I see it. I am the one who has to pick up the pieces when she crashes. Honestly, Audrey, if you cared about her, you would withdraw." I stared at him. "Excuse me? Withdraw from the list," he said. "Just tell them the timing is not right. Do it for her. It is too much pressure. Having you in her magazine while she is trying to plan a wedding, it looks messy. It looks like nepotism. It is hurting her credibility." He looked at me with faux concern. "I am just asking you to be the bigger person." He said, "Wait until after the wedding. Let her have her moment without this complication." It was a masterclass in manipulation. He was framing my success as an assault on his fiancée's well-being. He was asking me to cut my own throat to save her from a threat that he had invented. "I am not withdrawing." "Grant," I said. His eyes went cold. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the reptile underneath. "You are selfish, Audrey," he whispered. "You have always been selfish." He turned and walked away, slipping his arm around Celeste's waist as she came out of the cloakroom. He guided her out the door. The protective, loving partner. I felt sick. The business friction started on Thursday. I arrived at the office to find Naya pacing in the hallway. "We have a problem," she said. "What is it?" "The sensor shipment," she said. "The one from K-Tech. It is delayed." "Delayed?" I asked. "We paid for expedited shipping. We need those sensors for the new fleet rollout on Monday." "I know," Nia said. "I called their account manager. He was evasive." "Evasive how?" "He said there were relationship concerns," she said. "He said they are reviewing our credit terms." "Audrey, we have been paying them early for 3 years. Our credit is perfect." I walked into my office and slammed the door. K-Tech. The CEO of K-Tech was a man named David Lawton. David Lawton was on the board of the North Shore Summit, and Grant was friends with David Lawton. It was invisible. It was plausible deniability, a shipment delayed, a credit review, just normal business friction, but the timing was surgical. Grant was squeezing me. He was showing me that he could touch my business without leaving fingerprints. He was reminding me that his network was vast, and mine was fragile. I did not call David Lawton. I did not give Grant the satisfaction of seeing me panic. Call our secondary supplier. I told Nia, "Pay the rush fee. Get the sensors. It will cost us 20% more." Nia said, "Pay it." I said, I would burn the margin before I bent the knee. While I was fighting fires in the warehouse, the war was escalating on another front. I did not know it at the time, but while I was dealing with the sensors, Nolan Pierce was dealing with Grant's resume. I learned about it later, but the sequence of events was reconstructed for me with painful clarity. Nolan, the fact-checker with the thick glasses and the relentless attention to detail, had been doing his due diligence on the North Shore Summit partnership, since Grant was positioning himself as a key figure in the summit's orbit. Nolan ran a background check. He found the LinkedIn profile. Grant Howard, strategic consultant, senior advisor to Apex Capital, fellow at the Sterling Institute. Nolan called Apex Capital. They had no record of a Grant Howard. Nolan called the Sterling Institute. They had a record of a Grant Howard applying for a fellowship in 2015, but he was never accepted. Nolan, being a professional, flagged this to Celeste. Celeste, being a journalist, had to ask the question. She confronted Grant that Friday evening. They were at his apartment. She did not do it as an accusation. She did it as a clarification. "Grant," she said, holding a printout, "the fact-checkers are confused. You list the Sterling Fellowship on your bio, but the Institute says you were not a fellow." Is it a clerical error? She expected him to say. Oh, that is a mistake. I will fix it. Or, I did an independent study there. Maybe they categorized it differently. Instead, Grant exploded. He did not yell. He got quiet. He got victimized. Are you running a background check on me? He asked, his voice trembling with staged disbelief. I am just clearing the bio for the event program. Celeste said, It is standard. It is not standard. Grant said, It is an interrogation. You are treating me like one of your targets. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? I am your fiancé, and you are auditing my life. It is just a question. Grant, it is a lack of trust, he said. He stood up and paced the room. You are auditioning to humiliate me. You want to find a flaw so you can feel superior. That is your whole thing. Isn't it tearing men down to build your career? He flipped the narrative. Suddenly, the issue was not his lies. The issue was her lack of faith. The issue was her cruelty. He made her apologize. He made her apologize for finding out he was a liar. I received a text from Celeste on Saturday morning. Meet me. Coffee. The place on 4th. Alone. I went. The coffee shop was noisy, filled with the clatter of grinders and the chatter of students. Celeste was sitting in the back corner. She was not wearing her blazer. She was wearing a heavy wool sweater and no makeup. She looked exhausted. She looked at me as I sat down. Her eyes were red-rimmed. He is lying, she said. She did not say hello. She just dropped the words on the table like stones. About what I asked. Everything. She said, his resume, his consulting work. I called the companies. Audrey. He never worked for Apex. He never consulted for half the firms he lists. I nodded slowly. I was not surprised. And the Renfall Trust. She said. I froze. You know about Renfall, I asked. Nolan found a connection. She said, a vendor overlap. The North Shore Summit is using a vendor for their gala that was also the primary contractor for a charity scandal involving the Renfall Trust 7 years ago. And Grant was on the board of Renfall. She looked at me, pleading for me to contradict her. Tell me I'm crazy, she said. Tell me I am just being an investigative journalist who cannot turn it off. Tell me your brother is not a fraud. I looked at the woman who was supposed to be my enemy. I looked at the woman my brother had pitted against me. I saw the fear in her face. She was realizing that the man she loved was a construct, a facade made of borrowed credit and inflated titles. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the folder I had prepared for Nolan but never sent. I slid it across the table. Open it, I said. Celeste opened the folder. She saw the loan documents. She saw the emails I had printed out, the ones where Grant forwarded my deck, the ones where he claimed he was steering the ship. She read them in silence. Her hand came up to cover her mouth. He took credit for your company, she whispered. He takes credit for everything. I said, he needs to own things. He needs to be the source of the light. If he cannot be the sun, he will block out the sky so no one else can shine either. Celeste looked up at me. A tear leaked out of the corner of her eye. He told me you were jealous, she said. He told me you were mentally unstable. He told me I had to manage you. He told me you were a predator. I said, he told me you would use my secrets to build your brand. He told me you hated me. We stared at each other. The noise of the coffee shop faded. We were two women standing in the wreckage of the same manipulation. He is scared, Celeste said. Her voice was shaking. He is terrified of this article. Because if you are real, then he is nothing. If I am real, then he is just the brother of a successful woman and the husband of a famous journalist, I said. And to Grant, that is death. Celeste closed the folder. She placed her hand on top of it. She took a deep breath. The trembling stopped. The journalist came back. The steel came back. I cannot publish the profile without disclosing the conflict, she said. I know, I said. And if I disclose the conflict, if I connect Grant to the Renfall vendor and the North Shore Summit, it will blow up everything. The wedding, his reputation, my magazine. She looked at me. What do you want me to do? Audrey. It was the question of the decade. I could tell her to kill the story. We could bury it. We could go back to the way it was. I could go back to the dark, and she could marry a lie. We could keep the peace. But the peace was a lie, too. I leaned forward. I cannot make that choice for you. Celeste, I said, you have to decide what you are marrying. I stood up. I felt a strange, terrifying lightness. But I will say this, I added, if you want the truth, you might have to be brave about what it costs. I left her there at the table, her hand resting on the evidence of her fiancé's hollow life. I walked out into the cold air of the street. I did not know what she would do. I did not know if she would burn it all down or let the fire go out. But for the first time, I wasn't holding the match alone. The invisible thread connecting my brother to my business was not just an emotional cord. It was a financial wire, and I had just discovered it was live. I sat in my office with the blinds drawn, staring at the PDF on my screen. Celeste had not just opened a door, she had torn down the wall. Her investigation into Renfall Civic Trust had moved from a background check to a forensic excavation. She had sent me her initial findings via an encrypted signal message, bypassing the email servers Grant might be monitoring. The text was sparse, but the attachment was heavy. Renfall Civic Trust, the report read, was the primary fundraising vehicle for the Beacon Hill Restoration Project in 2018. The project raised $3 million. Only $400,000 was ever accounted for in construction costs. The rest vanished into consulting fees and administrative overhead. I read the numbers again. $3 million. And then I looked at my own books, my Angel Bridge, the $200,000 that had saved Halcyon from insolvency during that same fiscal year. I had always assumed it was a benevolent grant from a regional development fund, brokered by a third party. But the wire transfer code on the original receipt matched the routing number Celeste had flagged for the Renfall disbursement account. My stomach turned over. I had not just accepted a loan, I had potentially laundered the proceeds of a civic fraud. I had done it unknowingly. Yes, but intent does not matter to the IRS, and it certainly does not matter to the court of public opinion. I picked up my phone. My hand was not shaking. I had passed the point of fear and entered the cold clarity of damage control. I need to see you. I told Marin. Now, Marin Holt was my corporate counsel. She was a woman who viewed optimism as a liability and treated silence as a currency. Her office was in a brutalist concrete building that looked like a fortress. I laid the papers on her mahogany desk. "Tell me I am clean," I said. Marin put on her reading glasses. She spent 10 minutes reading the documents. She cross-referenced them with my corporate filings on her tablet. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the hum of the air filtration system. Finally, she took off her glasses. "Legally," she said, "you are likely fine. You have a signed loan agreement. You paid the principal and interest back in full. You have a paper trail that shows a legitimate business transaction. You were a borrower. Audrey, not a co-conspirator. You did not know the source of the funds was radioactive." I exhaled. "But," I asked. I heard the but in her tone. "But the law is binary, and the narrative is a spectrum." Marin said. She tapped the paper. "If this Renfall story breaks, and if your brother is named as a director, and if it comes out that his little sister's company received a 6-figure injection from the pot." The headline writes itself. Family slush fund, nepotism disguised as innovation. She looked at me with hard, dark eyes. "It does not matter if you paid it back. Audrey, it matters that you touched the money. In this climate, guilt by association is the only verdict that sticks." I stared at the wall. I had built Halcyon on the principle of absolute transparency. I tracked every package, every gallon of fuel, every minute of driver time, and yet, at the foundation, there was a rot I hadn't seen. "Grant put me there," I said quietly. "He arranged the crisis that forced me to need the money, and then he arranged the money." Marin did not look surprised. "Then you have a choice," she said. "You can wait for the explosion and try to survive the blast radius, or you can detonate it yourself. On your terms. While I was consulting lawyers, Grant was planning a pageant. He could feel Celeste pulling away. The air between them had grown thin and cold. I knew this because he did what he always did when he felt his grip slipping. He tried to make the grip public. He tried to cement the relationship with an audience. He called me on Tuesday afternoon. "Audrey," he said. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. "I need a favor. I am busy." "Grant, it is for Celeste." He said, "We are doing an engagement shoot this weekend, with Vanity Fair. Well, with a photographer who shoots for them. We are going to do a whole spread. The power couple of the quarter. I need you to come to the fitting and help her pick a dress. She is being difficult." "Difficult?" I asked. "She is saying she does not want to do it." He said. He laughed. A brittle, cracking sound. "Can you believe that she is a public figure? This is part of the job. But she is in this mood. She says she is a reporter, not a model." I told her, "Darling, you are a brand." I closed my eyes. He did not see her. He saw a mirror. "Grant," I said, "maybe she just wants to be a journalist. She is embarrassed by me," he snapped. The cheerfulness vanished instantly. "That is what it is. She thinks because I do not have a Pulitzer that I am not on her level. She wants to keep me in the background, but I am not a background player. Audrey, I am the reason she is even in this social bracket." He was unraveling. The narrative he had constructed that he was the Titan and we were his satellites was dissolving, and he was clawing at the walls. "I cannot help you." "Grant," I said. "You are useless," he said. "Just like always, you take the money, you take the help, and when the family needs you, you are busy." He hung up. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. "You take the money." He knew. He knew about the Renfall money. He had never mentioned it, but he held it in reserve, a weapon he could deploy if I ever tried to cut the string. The pressure did not stop with Grant. It trickled down to the lieutenants. My mother, Claudia, came to my apartment that evening. She did not call first. She simply appeared at my door, wearing a cashmere coat and a look of pained martyrdom. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked into my living room and looked around with critical eyes. She adjusted a stack of books on my coffee table. "Grant is devastated," she said. She did not say hello. She went straight to the wound. "He seems fine." "Mother," I said, "he is planning a photo shoot. He is in pain." "Audrey," she said. She turned to me, her face softening into that weaponized pity I knew so well. "He feels like he is losing her, and he feels like he is losing you." "I am right here." I said. "Are you?" she asked. "You are doing this interview. You are digging up the past. You are making him feel small." I felt a flash of anger, hot and sharp. "I am running a company." I said, "I am successful. Why does my success require his failure? Why is it a seesaw?" "Mother, why can't we both be up? Because Grant needs to be needed," she cried. Her voice rose. "That is who he is. He needs to be the provider. When you act like you don't need him, when Celeste acts like she is above him, it destroys him." She reached out and took my hands. Her palms were soft and cold. "Be gentle. Audrey," she whispered. "Please, for the family. Just dim the light a little bit. Withdraw from the list. Let him have the wedding. Let him feel important. Is that so much to ask, dim the light?" It was the request she had been making of me since I was 6 years old. "Don't get straight A's." Grant struggled on his report card. "Don't run so fast. Grant has asthma. Don't build a $40 million company. Grant is consulting." I pulled my hands away. "I cannot do that anymore." I said, "I will not set myself on fire to keep him warm." My mother stiffened. The softness vanished. She looked at me with a cold, terrifying disappointment. "You have become very hard." "Audrey," she said. "I survived." I said. She left without another word. The silence she left behind was heavy. But for the first time, it did not feel like guilt. It felt like clarity. The package arrived on Thursday. It came to my office, delivered by a bike courier. It was a plain manila envelope, sealed with heavy tape. There was no return address. I opened it with a letter opener. Inside was a stack of papers, photocopied and stapled. They smelled of toner and old dust. I fanned them out on my desk. They were board minutes. Minutes of the meeting of the Board of Directors. Renfall Civic Trust, October 2018. I scanned the list of attendees. Grant Howard, Interim Outreach Lead. And there, in the body of the text, under the heading Strategic Partnerships, Motion to Approve Vendor Contract with Garrison Public Affairs for the Beacon Hill Gala Event Management. Contract value $450,000. Motion seconded by Grant Howard, Garrison Public Affairs. I knew that name. I had seen it recently. I searched my memory. Where? And then it clicked. I grabbed the media kit Celeste had left with me after our interview. It was a glossy folder explaining the Ledger and Laurel partnership with the North Shore Summit. I flipped to the back page. The fine print listing the event sponsors and logistical partners. Event production provided by Garrison Public Affairs. My blood ran cold. Grant had steered a contract to Garrison Public Affairs 7 years ago using charity money from Renfall. And now, Garrison Public Affairs was producing the event where Grant was trying to position himself as a star. It was the same play. It was the same money. I looked at the envelope again. Who sent this? My first thought was Celeste. She was the investigator. She had the access. But why send it anonymously? Why not just hand it to me? I checked the courier receipt attached to the front, sent by Kinko's Copy Center. 4th Street. It wasn't Celeste. Celeste would have used her secure drop. This was someone else. Someone who had access to the old Renfall files. Someone who knew Grant's name was on them. Someone who wanted me to know, but was too afraid to show their face. Maybe an old secretary. Maybe a disgruntled accountant. Or maybe, just maybe, someone inside Grant's own circle who was tired of the lies. I put the papers in my bag. I needed to show Celeste. I texted her. We need to talk. Not at the office. Not at your place. She replied with an address for a cafe in the sleepy part of the Lower East Side. A place with cracked tile floors and tables that wobbled. She was waiting for me when I arrived. She looked worse than she had at the coffee shop. She looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. Her engagement ring was missing. I noticed the pale band of skin on her finger where it used to be. Audrey, she said. I sat down. I did not waste time with pleasantries. How are you? I asked. I am postponing, she said. Her voice was flat. I cannot do it. I cannot stand up there and say vows to a man I am investigating. Have you told him? No, she said. I am trying to figure out how to do it without him destroying everything. He is volatile right now. He is obsessed with this photo shoot. He thinks if we take a picture for a magazine, it makes the love real. I reached into my bag and pulled out the board minutes. You need to see this, I said. I slid the papers across the scratched table. Celeste picked them up. She read them slowly. I watched her eyes widen as she reached the line about Garrison Public Affairs. Garrison, she whispered. She looked up at me, her face pale. Garrison is running the North Shore Summit, she said. They are the primary vendor. Ledger and Laurel is paying them a massive retainer to handle the logistics. And Grant seconded the motion to pay them $500,000 from the Renfall charity pot 7 years ago. I said. She closed her eyes. It is a kickback scheme, she said. It has to be. He steers the contract to Garrison. Garrison overcharges. The money comes back around. And now he is doing it with your magazine. I said. Celeste put her head in her hands. Oh my God, she said. It is not just that he is a liar. He is compromising my publication. If this comes out, if it comes out that the guest editor's fiancé is laundering money through the event vendor, my career is over. Ledger and Laurel will never trust me again. She looked up. There was a new kind of fear in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of a heartbreak. It was the fear of professional annihilation. I have to stop it, she said. How I have to call for an audit, she said. I have to go to the editor-in-chief and tell them I suspect financial irregularities with the event partner. If you do that, I said, you trigger a war. Grant will know it was you. I know, she said. Just then, my phone buzzed on the table. Then Celeste's phone buzzed. It was the same notification. Grant Howard shared a location with you. He was nearby. I looked out the window. Across the street, standing on the corner, was Grant. He was wearing a long wool coat, looking at his phone. He looked up, scanned the street, and saw us. He saw us sitting together in the window of the cafe. His face changed. It went from confusion to a terrifying, blank rage. He crossed the street against the light. Cars honked. He did not look at them. He walked straight to the door of the cafe and shoved it open. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, a jarring counterpoint to the look in his eyes. He walked over to our table. He looked at me. Then he looked at Celeste. Then he looked at the papers on the table. So, he said. His voice was very quiet. This is the strategy meeting. Grant, Celeste said. She tried to cover the papers. Don't, he said. He reached out and snatched the board minutes from under her hand. He glanced at them. He didn't even read them. He just crumpled them in his fist. You are colluding, he said. We are talking. I said, you are stealing her, he said to me. He ignored Celeste. He looked only at me. You could not just have your little warehouse. You could not just make your money. You had to come for the one thing I had. You had to poison her against me. I did not poison her. Grant, I said, you did. He slammed his fist on the table. The cups rattled. The barista looked over, alarmed. I made you, he shouted. The veneer of the sophisticated consultant cracked and fell away. I made you relevant. I gave you the contacts, I gave you the money. And this is how you repay me. By whispering in my fiancé's ear. By trying to wreck my wedding. It is not about the wedding. Grant, Celeste said. She stood up. She was shaking, but her voice was strong. It is about the fraud. Grant whipped around to face her. Fraud, he hissed. You want to talk about fraud? You are the fraud. Celeste, you pretend to be this noble seeker of truth, but you are just a fame-hungry climber like the rest of them. You loved the idea of the power couple until you realized I might actually have some power. He laughed, and it was a sound of pure bitterness. You think you are choosing her? He asked, pointing at me. You think she is the hero? She is a sociopath. She hid her life for 7 years. She lied to everyone, and now you two are bonding over what destroying me? He looked at us with a worldview that was so twisted, it was almost perfect in its logic. In his mind, attention was a finite resource. It was property, and we were thieves. We are not destroying you. Grant, I said, we are just turning on the lights. He stared at me. For a second, I thought he might hit me. His hand twitched, but he saw the barista reaching for the phone behind the counter. He saw the other patrons watching. He straightened his coat. He smoothed his hair. He put the mask back on, though it was crooked now. Fine, he said. Play your games. Run your audit. Write your little story. But remember this, I know where the bodies are buried. Audrey, because I helped you dig the holes. He threw the crumpled papers at me. They bounced off my chest and landed on the floor. He turned and walked out. The cafe was silent. Celeste sank back into her chair. She was trembling violently. He knows, she said. He knows we know. I picked up the papers from the floor. I smoothed them out. He is scared. I said. Celeste looked at me. Her face was set in a grim line. He should be, she said. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number. Who are you calling? I asked. The editor-in-chief, she said. She put the phone to her ear. Hello? David. It is Celeste. We have a problem with the North Shore Partnership. I need to request an immediate external audit of the vendor contracts, specifically Garrison Public Affairs. Yes, I know the timeline. I know it puts the issue at risk. But if we don't do it, we are complicit. She listened for a moment. Yes, she said. I am willing to stake my resignation on it. She hung up. She looked at me. "It is done." She said, "The war was no longer cold. The audit was coming. The wedding was likely dead. And Grant Howard was out there in the city, wounded, desperate, and dangerous." I reached across the table and took Celeste's hand. It was the first time we had touched as allies. "Get a hotel tonight," I said. "Do not go home." "I know," she said. We sat there for a long time, two women in a wobbly cafe, watching the street, waiting for the fallout to begin. The audit did not begin with a siren. It began with the quiet, rhythmic clicking of a keyboard in a windowless room. Nolan Pierce was not a dramatic man. He was a creature of spreadsheets and public records, a man who found excitement in the discrepancy between a tax filing and a bank statement. He had been digging into the vendor list for the North Shore Summit for 3 days, authorized by the legal department of Ledger and Laurel under the guise of a standard compliance review. Celeste forwarded me his preliminary findings on a Tuesday morning. The subject line was blank. The attachment was a single PDF. I opened it in my car before I went into the office. Nolan had traced the payment structures. He found that the North Shore Summit had paid a retainer of $150,000 to a consulting firm called Blue Harbor Strategies. Blue Harbor Strategies had no website, no employees on LinkedIn, and a registered address that was a mailbox in a strip mall in Delaware. But Nolan had found the articles of incorporation for Blue Harbor. The registered agent was a lawyer I did not know, but the initial signatory on the bank account opening documents, buried in a misfiled state compliance form from 6 years ago, was a familiar name, Garrison Public Affairs, and the dates of the deposits into Blue Harbor's account matched, almost to the week, the dates that funds had gone missing from the Renfall Civic Trust campaign in 2018. It was a circle, a perfect, closed loop of money moving from charity to consultant to shell company, all overseen by the same people. And my brother, Grant, had been the board member who signed the checks at the beginning of the pipe. I put the phone down. The morning sun was hitting the windshield, but I felt cold. It was no longer a theory. It was math. Grant knew the walls were closing in. I knew he knew because he stopped threatening me and started trying to buy me. He showed up at Halcyon Roteworks at 10 o'clock that morning. He did not barge in. He did not demand to see me. He told the receptionist he was my brother and that he would wait until I had a free moment. He sat in the lobby, charming the administrative assistant, looking for all the world like a supportive sibling stopping by for coffee. When I walked out to the lobby, he stood up. He was wearing a soft cashmere sweater. He looked tired, but his smile was practiced, warm, and terrifyingly normal. "Audrey," he said, "do you have a minute? I brought you a matcha. I know it is your favorite." He held out a paper cup. I looked at the cup. I looked at him. "Come to my office," I said. I did not take the drink. In my office, I left the door open 3 inches. I wanted witnesses. I wanted my staff to hear if voices were raised. Grant sat down in the guest chair. He looked around the room, nodding appreciatively. "You have done a great job with this place," he said. "I mean it. I know I joke about the warehouse stuff, but it is impressive. You built a real machine here. What do you want?" "Grant," I asked. I sat behind my desk, keeping the barrier of oak between us. "I want a truce," he said. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. He looked earnest. He looked like the brother I had wanted when I was 6 years old. "We are family. Audrey. This thing with Celeste, with the magazine, it has gotten out of hand. We are hurting each other. And for what? For a story. For some headlines." He paused. He waited for me to agree. I said nothing. "I have been thinking," he continued. "I have been too hard on you. I have been jealous. I admit that. I see you succeeding, and it makes me feel like I'm falling behind. That is my fault. I own that." He looked at me with wet eyes. It was a beautiful performance. "So here's what I want to do," he said. "I want to help you. When this list comes out, I want to be the one to host the celebration. I want to stand up at the North Shore Gala and toast you. I want to tell everyone that I'm proud of my little sister. I want to give you the credit you deserve. I will tell them you did it all on your own. I will retract the stuff about me helping you. I will give you the spotlight. Audrey, all of it. I watched him. I watched the way he framed his concession as a gift. He was offering me the truth about my own life as if it were a favor he could grant. And in exchange, I asked. He shrugged. A small, casual movement. In exchange, we just move on. We stop digging into the past. We stop talking about Renfall. We stop looking at old board minutes. We just focus on the future. You get your cover. I get my wedding. And the family stays whole. He smiled. A conspiratorial smile. Silence for glory, he said. That is the deal. I let you shine, and you let me live, because I love you. Odds. And I do not want to see you get hurt by things you do not understand. I felt a profound stillness settle over me. For years. I had craved his approval. For years. I had wanted him to say exactly those words, I'm proud of you. You did it on your own. But now that he was saying them, I realized they were worthless. They were counterfeit currency. He was trying to bribe me with my own achievements. I looked at my brother. I saw the fear behind the charm. I saw the desperation of a man who had built a castle on a sinkhole and was trying to convince me not to look at the foundation. I am not bargaining with my own life. Grant, I said. His smile faltered. What my story is not yours to give, I said. It is already mine. I do not need you to let me shine, and I certainly do not need your permission to tell the truth. Audrey, be reasonable, he said. His voice hardened slightly. If you keep pushing this, if you and Celeste keep pushing, you are going to break Mom's heart. You are going to humiliate the family. I am not the one who embezzled money from a charity. Grant, I said. He flinched. The word embezzled hung in the air like a gunshot. You do not know what you are talking about, he hissed. It was complicated. It was standard operating procedure. It was theft, I said, and I will not be complicit in it anymore. I will not trade my integrity for your applause. Grant stood up. The cashmere sweater suddenly looked like armor. You are making a mistake, he said. You think you are safe because you have this company. You think you are untouchable. You are fragile. Audrey, you have always been fragile, and if you go to war with me, you are going to shatter. Get out of my office, I said. He looked at me one last time. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Then he turned and walked out. He took the matcha with him. The retaliation was swift. 2 days later, on Thursday, I received a call from the procurement officer at Logicorp. Logicorp was a prospective client, a massive retail chain that was considering Halcyon for their Northeast distribution. The contract was worth $12 million a year. We were in the final stages of negotiation. Audrey, the officer said. His voice was awkward. We are going to have to pause the contract signing. Pause, I asked. Why? We received some information. He said. An anonymous tip. It concerns your initial capitalization table. My heart hammered. What information? I asked. The allegation is that Halcyon was founded with funds linked to a financial crimes investigation. He said, specifically, a misappropriated civic grant. I closed my eyes. Grant. He had done it. He had taken the one thing he knew, the Renfall money, and he had weaponized it against me. He knew that if he framed it as my scandal, the clients would run. He was betting that I would stay silent to protect myself, that I wouldn't dare explain the source of the money because it would implicate him. It is a scorched earth tactic. If he was going down, he was taking the warehouse down with him. I understand. I said to the officer, "Give me 1 hour." I hung up. I stood in my office. The panic rose in my throat. Hot and sour. This was the nightmare. This was the reason I had stayed in the dark for 7 years. But I was not the same woman I had been 7 years ago. I walked out of my office and went to Nia's desk. "Call the board," I said, "and call the legal team. Emergency meeting in 20 minutes. Nia looked at my face. She saw the war paint. "On it," she said. 20 minutes later, I stood at the head of the conference table. My 3 board members, independent industry veterans I had handpicked, were on the screen. Naya and Marin sat to my right. I did not spin it. I did not hide. In 2018, I accepted a bridge loan of $200,000 to make payroll. I said, I was told it was a standard grant. I have recently discovered that the source of those funds was a civic trust that is currently under investigation for fraud. My brother was a director of that trust. The room was silent. I paid the money back in full, with interest. 6 months later, I continued. I have the wire transfers. I have the loan agreement. I was a borrower, not a beneficiary of the fraud. But someone is using this connection to smear the company to our clients. One of the board members, a gruff logistics veteran named Carl, leaned into the camera. Is the money clean now? He asked. Completely. I said, we have been audited 3 times since then. Then we fight, Carl said. I spent the next 6 hours drafting a crisis disclosure package. I wrote a letter to the procurement officer at Logicorp. I attached the loan documents. I attached the repayment receipts. I attached a sworn affidavit from my lawyer stating that Halcyon was not a target of any investigation. I sent the package. Then I called the client. I am not hiding this. I told him I was a victim of a bad loan structure 7 years ago. I corrected it. If you want to judge me on my routing efficiency, look at the data. If you want to judge me on family gossip, that is your choice. But I will not let an anonymous lie dictate my business. There was a long silence on the other end. Send me the affidavit, he said. We will review it. It was not a victory. It was a stay of execution, but I had stopped the bleeding. I sat in my chair at 8 o'clock that night, exhausted. I was doing crisis management for a crisis I didn't create. I was cleaning up Grant's mess again. But this time, I wasn't cleaning it up to save him. I was cleaning it up to bury him. While I was fighting for my company, Celeste was fighting for her reality. She came to my apartment that night. She had a bag with her. She had checked into a hotel, just as I advised. But she needed to talk. She sat on my sofa, wrapping her hands around a mug of tea. She looked small. I confronted him. She said, her voice was hollow. When last night, she said, I went back to the apartment to get my things. He was there. He was waiting. What happened? I showed him the Nolan file. She said, the consulting fees, the Blue Harbor connection. I laid it all out. I don't know what I thought. I thought maybe he would break down. Maybe he would confess. She took a sip of tea. Her hand was shaking. He laughed. Audrey. He laughed at me. He laughed. He told me I was hysterical. He said, oh, here we go. Pulitzer Prize-winning Celeste, trying to turn a boring accounting error into Watergate. He said I was addicted to drama. He said I couldn't handle a normal relationship. So I had to invent a villain. I nodded. It was the classic Grant playbook. Deny, minimize, pathologize. He told me my success depends on tearing men down. She whispered. He said I am a misandrist with a keyboard. He said I was sabotaging the wedding because I was afraid of intimacy. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. And for a minute, Audrey, for a minute, I believed him. I started thinking, am I crazy? Is this just a consulting fee? Am I ruining my life for nothing? That is what he does. I said, he rewrites reality while you are standing in it. He is so good at it, she said. He stood there, looking so hurt, so misunderstood. He asked me how I could betray his trust like this. He made me feel like the criminal. She wiped her eyes. I fell in love with a ghost. She said, the man I agreed to marry, the charming consultant, the supportive partner. He never existed. He was curated. He was a collection of anecdotes and stolen valor stitched together to look like a person. He has always been curated. I said softly. I looked at the woman sitting on my couch. She was brilliant. She was brave. And she had been dismantled by a man who treated human beings like mirrors. What about the audit? I asked. It is moving, she said. The legal team is demanding the garrison contracts. The editor-in-chief is furious. But he is backing me. He knows if we publish a corrupt list, the magazine is dead, And the wedding postponed. She said, I told him I needed space. I didn't tell him it was over. I was afraid. You have to be careful. Celeste, I said, when he realizes he has lost you, really lost you, the mask will come off completely. The summons came on Friday morning. It was a group text from my father. Martin. Family meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. The house. Mandatory. I called Celeste. Did you get it, I asked? Yes, she said. Are you going? I have to, she said. If I don't go, he will spin the narrative to your parents. I need to be there to defend the facts. I will pick you up. I said, we go in together. We drove to my parents' house in Connecticut in silence. It was a large, imposing colonial with white pillars and manicured hedges. It looked like the set of a movie about a happy family when we walked in. The atmosphere was suffocating. My mother was arranging flowers in the hallway, her movements jerky and anxious. My father was in the living room, pacing in front of the fireplace. Grant was sitting in the leather armchair. He was holding a drink. He looked calm, too calm. Ah, the prosecution has arrived, Grant said as we walked in. Sit down. My father barked. We sat on the sofa. My mother came in and sat on the ottoman, wringing her hands. This has to stop, my father said. He looked at me, then at Celeste. This investigation, this gossip, it is tearing this family apart. It is not gossip. Martin, Celeste said, it is financial irregularity involving the magazine I work for. It is a misunderstanding, my father shouted. He rarely shouted. Grant explained it to us. It was a vendor issue from 7 years ago. A clerical error. And you are trying to turn it into a federal case. I looked at Grant. He smirked into his glass. He had gotten to them first. He had given them the sanitized version. Grant, tell them, my father said. Grant sighed. He put his drink down. He looked at us with that same practiced earnestness he had used in my office. Look, he said, I admit, the paperwork at Renfall was sloppy. We were a small board. We relied on third-party administrators. Maybe some fees were miscategorized. If that is the case, I apologize. I take responsibility for not watching the accountants closely enough. He looked at Celeste. I am sorry. Honey, he said, I should have been clearer. I didn't want to worry you with boring board details. I was trying to protect you from the minutiae. See, my mother said, he apologized. He is taking responsibility. That is not responsibility. I said, my voice was steady. That is a deflection. Grant, you directed funds to a shell company. You steered contracts to your friends. That is not a clerical error. That is fraud. Audrey, my mother snapped. Do not use that word. It is the truth. Mother, I said. My father stepped forward. His face was red. Here is what is going to happen, he said. Celeste, you are going to call off this audit. You are going to tell your editors that you made a mistake. You are going to proceed with the wedding. And Audrey, you are going to drop this obsession with the past. We are a family. We protect our own. He looked at us with a desperate, tyrannical authority. We do not air our dirty laundry, he said. We fix it, inside the house. I looked at my father. I realized then that he didn't care if Grant was guilty. He cared if Grant was caught. He was not a patriarch. He was a PR manager. I cannot do that. Martin, Celeste said, the audit is already external. It is out of my hands. Then get it back in your hands, my father yelled. It is too late. I said. Suddenly, my mother spoke. Her voice was quiet, cutting through the shouting. Grant, she said, did you use the Garrison account again? The room went silent. We all turned to look at her. Claudia was looking at her son with a strange, terrified expression. Grant froze. What he said, the Garrison account. She repeated, the pass-through. Did you use it for the magazine event? Grant shifted in his chair. Mom, don't, he said. You told me that was closed. She said. Her voice rose. You told me after the Beacon Hill mess, when we had to cover the shortfall. You told me you closed that account. I felt the air leave the room. My father looked at his wife. Claudia, he said. What are you talking about? My mother looked at me. Then she looked at Celeste. She looked like a woman who had been carrying a stone for 7 years and just dropped it on her own foot. In 2018, she whispered, when the money went missing from the project, Grant came to me. He was in trouble. He said it was an accounting mix-up. But the money was gone. She took a ragged breath. I gave him the money to replace it. She said, from my trust. We structured it as a loan repayment. We helped him step down from the board quietly, to avoid a scandal. She looked at Grant, her eyes pleading. You promised me. Grant, you promised you would never do it again. You said it was a mistake. I stared at my mother. She knew. She had known for 7 years. She knew he was a fraud. She knew he had stolen money, and she had paid for his silence. She had covered it up, and all those times she told me to be gentle. All those times she told me to dim my light. It wasn't because she wanted to protect Grant's feelings. It was because she wanted to protect the family's secret. She was afraid that if I shone too bright, I would illuminate the crime she had helped bury. Mother, I said, my voice sounded far away. You knew. She started to cry. I was protecting him. She sobbed. He is my son. I couldn't let him go to jail. And what about me, I asked. The money came to me. Mother, the Angel Bridge, that was the stolen money. Wasn't it? You cycled it through me to wash it. She didn't answer. She just wept into her hands. Grant stood up. The game was up. The apology was gone. Oh, stop the dramatics, he shouted. He looked at us with pure venom. So what? So Mom helped me out. That is what families do. We help each other. Unlike you two. You two are just looking for a reason to cut me out. He pointed a shaking finger at Celeste. You want to audit me? Go ahead, audit me. You will find nothing that sticks to me personally. I was insulated. I made sure of it. He looked at me. And you? He sneered. You think you are so holy? You spent that money, Audrey. You built your empire on my fraud. You are just as dirty as I am. I stood up. I looked at my brother. I looked at my parents. My father confused and broken. My mother weeping in her shame. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart. It was the chain. The heavy, rusted chain of obligation that had bound me to these people for 34 years. I am not dirty, I said. I paid it back, and I am done paying for you. I turned to Celeste. Let's go, I said. Celeste stood up. She looked at Grant. She took off the engagement ring, the one she hadn't been wearing, but had kept in her pocket. She placed it on the coffee table. It didn't make a sound on the heavy wood. Goodbye, Grant, she said. We walked out of the house. We walked past the manicured hedges and the white pillars. My father was shouting something from the doorway, but I didn't listen. We got into my car. I started the engine. Celeste looked at me. She was pale, but her eyes were dry. Your mother knew. She said, yes, I said. She covered it up. Yes. We drove down the long driveway. The house disappeared in the rearview mirror. The convergence began 3 days later. Ledger and Laurel announced the publication date for the 30 Rising Innovators issue. It was going to print in 2 weeks. My name was still on the list. Celeste had not removed it. The editorial board, briefed on the situation but impressed by the transparency of my disclosure, had decided to keep me. They viewed my willingness to open the books as a sign of leadership. Celeste was still listed as guest editor. She had refused to step down. She was staying to oversee the audit, to ensure that every word in the issue was clean. And the wedding date passed. It was a silent Saturday. No church bells, no reception. Just a cancellation notice sent out by email, citing unforeseen personal circumstances. But Grant was not gone. He was cornered. He was humiliated. He had lost his fiancée. His reputation was crumbling, and his family's protection had been exposed as a sham. The silence from his end was not peace. It was the pullback of the tide before the tsunami. I sat in my office, looking at the calendar. The North Shore Summit Gala was in 10 days. I was going to be on that stage. Celeste was going to be on that stage. And I knew, with a dark and absolute certainty that Grant would be there too. He wouldn't let us have the moment. He wouldn't let the story end without trying to write the final chapter himself. I picked up the phone and called security. Triple the guard for the gala. I said. I hung up. I looked out at the warehouse floor. The robots were moving in their perfect, silent grid. They were safe. They were predictable. The human world was about to burn. The lights of the North Shore Summit Gala were not warm. They were a cold, interrogative white, designed to make diamonds sparkle and sweat visible. I walked into the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel at 7 o'clock sharp. I was not wearing the pastel chiffon my mother would have chosen. I was wearing a suit of midnight blue silk, tailored to within an inch of its life. I wore no jewelry. I carried no clutch. My hands were empty because I needed them free. The room was a sea of black ties and bare shoulders. 500 of the most powerful people in the Northeast Business Corridor were drinking champagne and trading business cards. I saw the faces of venture capitalists who had ignored my emails 5 years ago. I saw the tech reporters who only wrote about founders under 25. I moved through them like a ghost. I was a nominee for the Rising Innovator Award, but I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a bomb technician walking toward a live wire. Audrey. I turned. It was Nia Park, my COO. She looked terrified. She was checking her phone every 30 seconds. "You look incredible," she said. "But you also look like you are about to fire someone." I said. "Is the security team in place?" "We have 4 guys," Nia said. 2 at the stage wings, 2 at the exits. They have Grant's photo. They know the drill. Good. I looked across the room. I saw the ledger and laurel table. It was the centerpiece of the event. The publisher, a man named Arthur Vance, was holding court, but Celeste was not there. 3 floors up, in a private executive suite, Celeste Marlowe was fighting for her professional life. She stood on one side of a mahogany conference table. On the other side sat Arthur Vance and the head of legal for the magazine group. Between them lay the final audit report that Nolan Pierce had delivered 1 hour ago. "It is a conflict of interest." "Arthur," Celeste said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were gripping the back of a leather chair. "It is a vendor overlap," Arthur said. He waved a hand dismissively. Garrison Public Affairs produced an event for a charity 7 years ago. Now they are producing this event. That is not a crime. Celeste, that is a small world. It is a funnel. Celeste said, "The charity was Renfall. The money from Renfall went to Garrison. Garrison paid kickbacks to a shell company. And now, Ledger and Laurel is paying Garrison $200,000 to run this gala." She leaned forward. "And the man who connected Renfall to Garrison is the same man who introduced Garrison to you for this event. Grant Howard." Arthur Vance frowned. He did not like hearing that his magazine was part of a laundering cycle. He liked it even less that the person telling him was a guest editor who was about to marry the suspect. Allegedly. The lawyer interjected, "We have no proof of kickbacks. We just have a pattern of payments to a consulting firm. It is enough to demand disclosure." Celeste said, "We have to run a transparency note in the issue, and we have to announce tonight that the event production was subject to an independent audit. We cannot hand out awards for integrity on a stage paid for by fraud." "Absolutely not," Arthur said. He stood up. "Do you know who is in that ballroom? Sponsors? Advertisers? If we announce an audit, we look incompetent. We look like we hired crooks. We did hire crooks," Celeste said, unknowingly. "But if we hide it now, we become accomplices." Arthur buttoned his jacket. "We are not saying a word. Celeste, the issue goes to print as is. You will go downstairs, you will smile, and you will present the awards. If you mention the audit, I will pull your contract. I will blacklist you from every publication in this city. Do you understand?" Celeste looked at him. She looked at the man who held the keys to the career she had built over a decade. She thought of the Caldwell Prize. She thought of her byline. Then she thought of the crumpled board minutes Grant had thrown at us in the cafe. She thought of his laugh. "I understand. Arthur, she said. She picked up her bag. But you should check the bylaws of the American Society of Magazine Editors. She said, if a guest editor believes the integrity of a piece is compromised, she has the right to withdraw her name or to publish a dissent. She walked to the door. I am not withdrawing, she said. I am dissenting. She walked out before he could fire her. I was standing near the stage entrance when I felt a hand on my elbow. It was a grip I knew. It was firm, possessive, and radiated heat. I turned. Grant was wearing a tuxedo. He looked impeccable. He had shaved. His hair was perfectly coiffed, and he smelled of the expensive sandalwood cologne he had worn since college. But his eyes were bloodshot, and there was a tightness around his mouth that makeup couldn't hide. "Hello? Audrey?" he said. "Grant?" I said. I stepped back, breaking his contact. "You are not supposed to be back here. This is for nominees only." "I am family," he said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I told security I was your brother. They let me right in. You really should hire better guards if you want to keep me out." "What do you want?" I asked. "I just wanted to wish you luck," he said. He leaned in close. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I wanted to see you before you go out there and take your bow. It is a big night for you." I said nothing. "You know," he continued, "I was thinking about it on the drive over. Mom is at home crying. Dad is sitting in the dark drinking scotch. Celeste is, well, who knows what Celeste is doing. She is probably writing some manifesto." He paused. "And here you are, the queen of logistics. You won. Didn't you? You got the magazine. You got the money. You got the girl. In a way, you turned everyone against me." "I did not turn them, Grant," I said. "I just stopped lying to them." He laughed. A short, sharp bark. "You were supposed to be the one who stays grateful." "Audrey," he said, "that was the deal. I shine. You clap. I lead. You follow. I help you. You owe me. When did you forget the rules?" I looked at him. I saw the genuine confusion in his face. He didn't understand. He truly believed that my life was a subdivision of his property. He believed my success was a theft of his potential. "I didn't forget the rules." I said, "I broke them." He stepped closer. His face twisted. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You think you can just walk on that stage and erase me? I made you. I found the money when you were drowning. I introduced you to the people who matter. You are nothing without my network. You are just a girl in a warehouse." "Grant," I said, "you are going to regret this." He said, "You are going to realize that it is very cold out there when you do not have your big brother to protect you." I looked over his shoulder. I saw one of the security guards I had hired, a large man named Kevin, scanning the room. I made eye contact. Kevin started moving toward us. Grant saw my eyes shift. He stepped back. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket. "Enjoy your trophy," he said. "It is hollow, just like you." He turned and disappeared into the shadows of the wings just as Kevin arrived. "Is everything okay, Ms. Howard?" Kevin asked. "No." I said, "Watch him. Do not let him near the microphone." My phone buzzed. It was Nia. "Emergency. Call me." I stepped into a quiet alcove behind the AV booth. I dialed Nia. "Tell me." I said. "It is Logicorp," Nia said. Her voice was tight. "The procurement officer just called me. He said the legal team is spooked. They saw a tweet. A tweet. Someone posted a thread about the Renfall connection 10 minutes ago. She said, it is an anonymous account. It lays out the board connection, the bridge loan, everything. It calls Halcyon a laundromat for failed charity funds." I closed my eyes. Grant. He wasn't waiting for the story to break. He was leaking it himself to poison the water before I could drink. "What did Logicorp say?" I asked. "They said they want a statement." Nia said, "Tonight, before you go on stage, they want you to disavow the loan publicly. They want you to say you were defrauded by your brother. They want a scapegoat. Audrey, if you don't give them a name, they walk." I gripped the phone. "If I name him," I said, "I start a public war with the family. If I don't, I lose the biggest contract of my career." "Audrey," Nia said, "you have to choose. Do you want to be safe, or do you want to be clean? I looked at the stage. The moderator was walking up to the podium. The lights were dimming. Tell them to watch the live stream. I said, what? Tell Logicorp to watch the speech. I said, that is my statement. I hung up. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. And now, for the category of Operational Excellence and Rising Innovation, please welcome the founder of Halcyon Rootworks, Audrey Howard. The applause was polite, restrained. I was not a celebrity. I was an operator. I walked out onto the stage. The lights were blinding. I could not see the audience, but I could feel them. 500 judges in expensive suits. I reached the podium. The crystal trophy was heavy in my hand. I placed it on the lectern. I looked into the black void of the room. Thank you, I said. My voice did not shake. Usually, when people stand here, they thank the people who opened doors for them. I began. They thank their mentors. They thank their families for the unwavering support. I paused. The silence in the room deepened. I cannot do that tonight. I said, I built Halcyon Rootworks in the quiet. I built it on night shifts and double shifts. I built it with a team of people who care more about the truth of a delivery than the glory of the headline. I took a breath. There is a narrative that women in this industry are only here because they were invited, that we were placed in the room, that we were helped, guided, or steered by men who knew better. I gripped the sides of the podium. I am here to tell you that is a lie. I was not steered. I was not guided. I was obstructed. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. This was not the script. I stand here tonight not because of my connections, but in spite of them. I said, I stand here because when I was offered shortcuts that required my silence, I chose the long road. I stand here because I refuse to let my company be used as a vehicle for anyone else's ego or anyone else's debt. I looked toward the back of the room, where I knew Grant was watching. Innovation is not just about technology, I said. It is about integrity. It is about refusing to inherit the corruption of the past. It is about looking at the systems we are born into, whether they are supply chains or families, and having the courage to rout around the damage. I picked up the trophy. This belongs to the people who do the work. I said, not the people who claim the credit. Thank you. I stepped back. The applause was stunned, delayed. Then, slowly, it began to build. It started with the women in the room, then the engineers, then the founders who knew what it cost to build something real. But before I could leave the stage, a voice cut through the sound system. Wait, it was Celeste. She walked out from the opposite wing. She was not holding a trophy. She was holding a microphone she had taken from the backstage tech. She looked striking, dangerous, and completely calm. The music started to play her off, but she raised a hand. Cut the music, she said. The sound engineer, confused, killed the track. The room went silent again. I am Celeste Marlowe, she said. I am the guest editor for this month's issue of Ledger and Laurel. She looked at Arthur Vance in the front row. He was standing up, waving his arms at the stage manager to cut her mic. But Celeste was live. Tonight, we honor innovation, she said. But innovation requires transparency. As the editor of this package, I have a duty to the readers and to the honorees. She looked at me. She nodded. It has come to my attention that the production of this event involves a vendor with undisclosed financial conflicts tied to a past charity scandal. She said. A gasp went through the room. An independent audit has identified irregularities in the funding of the North Shore Summit Partnership. She continued. Specifically, payments made to entities controlled by individuals with personal ties to the selection committee. The room erupted. Phones were lifted. People were recording. This was a corporate execution, live on stage. I cannot certify the integrity of this event without this disclosure. Celeste said, Ledger and Laurel is a journal of record, and the record must be clean. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the wings. Grant burst onto the stage. He pushed past the security guard, who stumbled. Grant grabbed the podium mic. He looked wild. His tie was crooked. She is lying, he shouted. His voice cracked through the speakers. The The crowd recoiled. "She is hysterical," Grant yelled. He pointed at Celeste. "She is just angry because the wedding is off. This is personal. She is trying to ruin me because I left her." He turned to the audience. Spreading his arms, "I supported these women. I gave them everything I am, the reason they are here." "Sir, step away," the moderator yelled, running onto the stage. "I am the architect," Grant screamed. He was unraveling, the mask completely gone. He was a child having a tantrum in a tuxedo. "You don't understand. They are nothing without me." Kevin, the security guard, reached him. He grabbed Grant by the arm. "Get off me," Grant shrieked. "Do not touch me. I am Grant Howard." Kevin did not care. He hauled Grant backward. Grant's feet dragged on the stage floor. He was still shouting as he was pulled into the wings. "You are ungrateful. You are all ungrateful." Then, silence. The room was frozen. 500 people stared at the empty space where the architect had just been dragged away like a drunk at a bar fight. I looked at Celeste. She lowered her microphone. She looked exhausted, but she was standing tall. She turned and walked off the stage. She did not look back. I walked off the other side. The exit was a blur. I bypassed the press line. Reporters were shouting questions. "Ms. Howard, is it true about the charity? Was that your brother is Logicorp pulling the deal?" I did not answer. I walked straight to the loading dock exit where Nia was waiting with my car. Nia looked at me. Her eyes were wide. "That was," she started, "necessary." I said, "We got in the car." As we pulled away, I saw Celeste coming out of a side door. She was alone. She hailed a cab. She didn't look at her phone. She just got in and vanished into the city traffic. She had blown up her career to save her name. She was starting over. I checked my phone. The messages were flooding in. "Logicorp VP, bold move. We like bold. Let's talk Monday." Elise Ketter, finally. "Mom, how could you?" "You have destroyed him. Do not come home." I deleted my mother's text. Then, a new message appeared. It was from a number I did not recognize. It was not Grant. Grant was likely in a security holding room or being escorted off the premises. This message was different. "You think you stopped the wheel. You just broke a spoke." The people who funded Renfall are not the kind of people who like their investments audited. You don't know what you just stepped into. I stared at the screen. The money. The $3 million from the charity. Grant was the face. But he wasn't the source. He was just the middleman. And by exposing the middleman, I had drawn the attention of the architects above him. I looked out the window at the skyline of New York. The buildings were tall and dark, full of secrets and money moving in invisible pipes. I had turned on the lights, and now I could see the shadows stretching out toward me. "Drive." I told Nia. "Where to?" she asked. "The warehouse." I said, I needed to be where the work was real. I needed to be where the logic held. The family drama was over, but the war for survival had just begun. Author's note. Thank you for listening to this story. We have walked with Audrey through the fire of family betrayal and watched her choose the hard truth over the easy lie. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to choose between protecting a family secret and protecting your own integrity? Please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, resilience, and the long road to redemption. Until next time, keep the lights on.